Pager 1 blast at the payment counter. Pager 2 blast at the vegetable shop. Multiple pager blasts across Lebanon. "11 dead, 3,000 plus injured, several critical." Lebanon blames Israel for the pager attack. The deadliest tech strike is our top focus on India First. There is anger, there is panic and there is fear in Lebanon after a series of pager blasts. By some accounts, hundreds of pager blasts that took place late yesterday. The death toll right now is 12 dead and over 3,000 injured. Over 100 are critical. This is the most audacious strike that's taken place using an obsolete, absolutely obsolete communication device like a pager or the beeper, as the Americans call it. This is a one-way communication system no longer used anywhere in the modern world. And yet, when Hezbollah commander Hassan Nasrallah ordered his fighters to start using pagers and abandon mobile phones because he was apprehensive that mobile phones, one, can be intercepted, and two, there could be triangulation from the cell phone towers, and the location of the Hezbollah fighters could be known to Israelis, especially the Mossad. An order was placed to procure between 3,000 and 5,000 paging devices. They thought they were a step ahead of the adversaries. But the adversary of Hezbollah, they were a step ahead, and they planted some kind of an improvised explosive device said to be PETN, a thin layer of PETN on the batteries, triggered it with a microchip. All those details coming up. But first, take a look at this report.
A series of pagers used by Hezbollah fighters detonated across Lebanon on Tuesday. The explosions killed at least 11 and have injured over 3,000. Explosions were reported in capital Beirut, Bekaa, Nabatia and Bin Jabel.
The majority of the injuries we are recording so far are to the face, hands or abdomen area. There are also many eye injuries. Many of these were directed to the operating rooms in hospitals to receive the necessary care. I also want to add that there was great coordination between the Ministry of Health's emergency room as well as ambulatory services, hospitals and doctors.
There are multiple theories as to how the blast took place, ranging from explosives being implanted during manufacturing, remotely triggering explosions, doctored code to overheat battery or malware in pager operating systems.
You know, these guys are communicating through pagers in Syrian battlefront, and this is easily noticeable by all the major intelligence agencies in Syria. Using pager is a weakness. It could be done during the shipping. It could be done when they were waiting at the port. Certain management involved in this issue, there was this lower management, technicians and engineers and ITs could be involved.
Hezbollah wanted to shift from a mobile communication network to something secure, which is very, very simple and which has got low tech in it, so that they cannot be tracked. But this is not a 1 day or 1 month, or it is might be 2 years or 3 years they have planned. They have gone into the complete supply chain of this company, which is a Taiwanese based company, and changed the complete device planted some microchip and explosive device.
Hezbollah has issued an official statement calling the serial pager blast the biggest security breach. Israel has not claimed responsibility for Tuesday's blast, but Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, Yemen's Houthis, Iraq and the Arab League have all accused Israel of being behind the blast.
I think at present they'll fire some rockets, some missiles into Israel, try to cause some casualties. But I know that Israel is already prepared for it. And with the pagers being out of service, they would be scared to use the mobiles also. It will be very difficult to fight a coordinated battle with Israel.
Meanwhile, Israel has carried out airstrikes targeting Hezbollah terror outfits in South Lebanon. IDF warplanes attacked the Hezbollah's military buildings in 5 different areas in southern Lebanon.
We continue to believe that there should be a diplomatic resolution to this, and so I will leave it there. And well, actually, I'll add, this is why the ceasefire negotiation is so important. This is why the hostage deal is so important.
As mystery of exploding pagers deepens, one thing is for certain: this blows up the West Asia war theatre even more. Bureau Report, India Today.
So from agencies in Lebanon to open source intelligence, what's the information that we've been able to glean for you so far? When you look at the destroyed pagers, from the debris of the pagers, one thing is very clear. It's an alphanumeric pager believed to be manufactured in Taiwan. Gold Apollo is the name of the company that manufactures these pagers. AR924 is the model, AR924. Now, the pagers that exploded, they match this code and manufacturing company. The Gold Apollo has issued a statement that this consignment that had the IEDs or the PETN had not been manufactured by them. They insist that this is just the shell and not theirs. Information we've been able to gather seems to indicate that these pagers were procured recently by the Hezbollah. The Hezbollah had ordered between 3,000 to 5,000 pagers because Hassan Nasrallah, the commander, had ordered his men to get off mobile phones and start using pagers for one-way communication. The apprehension of either that information being intercepted was less, and 2, communication was coded. So to decipher that code would have taken a long time. The latest information that's emerging from Lebanon seems to indicate that this model number AR924 of paging device is believed to have been manufactured by the Gold Apollo company. It's suspected to have been used to plant the remotely detonate the explosives. Now there are conflicting reports about the quantity of explosives. It's believed to be PETN. That's what some experts believe. It's because these plastic explosives are very difficult to detect. Some analysts argue that it could be as little as 3 grams. Some say the kind of explosion that's taken place and its impact seems to indicate it could be anything between 15 to 20 grams of PETN, and a special chip, a microchip that was embedded. So when the message was remotely sent to that microchip, it triggered the heating of the battery, heating it to the extent that the PETN would get ignited and lead to an explosion. For the latest on this big story, let me quickly cut across to Mohammad Hassan Sawant, who's a political researcher who joins us from Beirut. I also have Pawan Duggal, one of India's best-known cybersecurity experts, and Sushant Sareen, senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, joining me on this broadcast. But Mohammad Hassan Sawant, I want to come to you first, sir, and understand from you. What can you tell me? What's the latest about the situation in Lebanon after the pager blast, sir?
Well, the latest about the situation is that, we have around 3,000 people injured today. Around 12 were martyred in the last incident, and the overall situation in Lebanon, it's not good. We have people mourning today because what Israel did is that it targeted civilian infrastructure in Lebanon. Target civilian people. And let me just give you a small information. People who use pagers in Lebanon are not only those who work with Hezbollah, because we use pager a lot in the health sector, in hospitals. We use pagers a lot in factories, in manufacturing, in different types of jobs and works. We use these kind of pagers. So that's why in the civilian casualties yesterday we have people who work with Hezbollah, and we have civilians, we have children killed yesterday, and that's why till now we view the act as state-sponsored terrorism. We view it as a violation of international law. We view it as a violation of the Geneva Convention.
What can you tell me about the nature of injuries that people have suffered? What part of the body has been most damaged in these explosions? Because I believe hospitals are overwhelmed across Lebanon and not just Beirut and Bekaa.
Yeah, true. Yes, there is an overwhelming inside the hospitals. Injuries are targeting three main things. It's either the hands. There are many injuries that the people injured that now don't have fingers, or their hands are detached. This is one type of injuries. The second type is related to the face. Many people injured today have no more ability to see, so their sight has been injured to a certain level, between 50% to 100%. It differs from one person to another. And the third type of injuries is near the stomach, because people used to hold these pagers in their belts, in their pants. So when they were detonated, they exploded near the stomach. So we have three types of injuries: near the stomach, in the hands, and affecting the sight and the face.
Before I bring in Sushant Sareen into this conversation, I quickly want to understand from you, what's the thinking in Lebanon? Who's responsible for this? And is this a major intelligence failure as far as Hezbollah in Lebanon are concerned? How could something like this happen?
Well, I will tell you how the view from Lebanon. No one in Lebanon today disagrees with the fact. Yeah, no one in Lebanon today disagrees with the fact that this is a state-sponsored terrorism. It's an Israeli attack. It's the Israel that planted the explosives and it detonated them and decided to bomb them yesterday. So it's the official government, the people, the whole society, with regard to different parts of the society, they all agree that it's Israel, it's terrorism, it's mass killing of civilian casualties. So that's how civilians and people in Lebanon view the situation. Regarding if it's a security breach or not, well, people in Lebanon do know that Israel is one of the strongest entities in the world. They do know that it has a very strong technological aspect, very strong economy, and very strong military. So they expect that Israel can do such stuff. They expect that it has the power and the dust to do such stuff. And what we saw in Gaza made us more convinced that there are no boundaries when you fight Israel. So
Stay with me for a moment. Let me also bring Sushant Sareen into this conversation. Sushant Sareen, is this a crippling blow for the Hezbollah, given more than 3,000 people are injured, 12 dead, but several, I believe, are critical? Some reports seem to indicate over 100 are critical.
So, Gaurav, I think without doubt, it's a pretty devastating strike because, in one fell swoop, you've hit the people who Israel blames for carrying out terrorism in Israel. I don't buy this nonsense about state-sponsored terrorism. After all, Hezbollah has been firing thousands of rockets into Israel.
So I think
are they
you're
targeting
on mute,
it at the military? Or are they just firing blind rockets and targeting even civilians? That the rockets don't hit is not because of Hezbollah is not targeting people. It's because Israel had certain capabilities. So leave that debate aside. I think, look, one, it hits the morale of the Hezbollah. Of course, they will make a big song and dance about how they are going to retaliate, how they're going to hit back. But I think, it scares the hell out of people that suddenly you were using something as a communication tool and, about 3,000 odd people have been hit. Okay, there would have been some collateral damage, definitely. But I think the bulk of the people who have been hit were people who were attached to the Hezbollah, and they've been targeted. Because obviously, this entire intelligence operation, which we are assuming is an intelligence operation, was carried out specifically because Hezbollah was ordering a certain consignment from a company, although people say it's a Taiwanese company, but they had licensed it to Bulgaria apparently. But here is the thing: how does an intelligence agency manage to rig thousands of pages? Gaurav, you and I both have studied terrorism. We know how difficult it is to rig a single bomb, how careful you have to be, how carefully people have to put explosives and then wire the whole thing together. This is not an assembly line bomb manufacturing, right? This is a very specific kind of a thing. You have to open the pager, then plant stuff, and to do it to 3,000, 5,000 odd pieces. I think it's a stupendous task. So unless the Israelis had bought over that factory surreptitiously and then used it as a manufacturing base and had some kind of an assembly line, I don't know how they've managed to do it. How can you do it in transit?
Let me take this to Kanish Gaur. Let me take this to Kanish Gaur.
I don't know. But if I was Hezbollah, I would be wondering how the hell they managed to do this. And that hits your morale, that hits your cadre. So, of course, it's a pretty devastating blow. I'm sure the Hezbollah will like to respond to it. But I think
I'll get Mohammad Shwedan to respond to that. But I want to quickly bring in Kanish Gaur also into this conversation. It's, how do you put, whether it's 5 grams or 20 grams of PETN inside a battery or around a battery and then a microchip and then wrap it in such a way that it remains undetected for months? I mean, this would be not just a brilliant or whatever way you look at it, an intelligence operation, also a scientific feat, Kanish Gaur, for in case it's Israel, for Israel to have done it.
This requires years of planning, and it is not just planting explosive. It is about a coordinated warfare. This dimension of warfare is called hybrid warfare. We've already seen some amount of hybrid warfare that happens in between the Russia and Ukraine war, but this is next level because you would require to hack into hardware, not software, but I'm talking about hardware level hacking and coordinating where these devices have landed, who's operating them, and then timing them so the explosive could be implanted and the kill button could be put so people could get damaged because of this happening. So it's a coordinated. It's not just
and remain undetected.
It's
now, Mohammad Hassan Shwedan, Sushant Sareen believes that this would adversely impact the morale of the Hezbollah, because if 3,000 such explosions or 3,000 people are injured, how many more such devices exist? The government in Lebanon was asking everyone to abandon their pagers. But could it be mobile phones? Could it be anywhere else? Who else is compromised? Who else is compromised as a Hezbollah operative? Hezbollah would be in a disarray right now.
Yeah, but first, let me just speak about one point. I'm really surprised that after having 40,000 civilian casualties inside of Gaza, someone doesn't believe that there's state-sponsored terrorism, number one. Number two, well, what you don't know is that most of the casualties yesterday are civilian casualties that are not related to Hezbollah. So the narrative that the injuries are mostly from Hezbollah is a wrong narrative. Well, and this is obvious when you see who were killed. We have 3 children till now killed in the last events. So I don't know, how do you define terrorism? My definition, based on international law and Geneva Conventions, define such act as state-sponsored terrorism. And with respect to the morale,
nobody's justifying the targeting of children.
Okay.
Nobody's justifying anything.
No,
but I want to stay on the substantive issue. Have Hezbollah fighters been targeted? Did Hassan Nasrallah ask his people to stop using mobile phones and switch to pagers? Have Hezbollah fighters been targeted? Let's stay on the substantive issue for the moment, sir.
Okay, great. So, yes, there was a decision which Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah spoke on media, asking his people not to hold phones anymore and to replace them. And they had pagers, of course, replacing phones in the last 11 months, since the beginning of the war in Gaza to today. But how will this affect the morale? well, for me being in Beirut, and I'm a journalist and I write for magazines, I hear from people. Well, what happened yesterday is that the whole Lebanese society decided to stand by the injured people. And this was a surprise because, Lebanon is divided based on sects. We have Shias, we have Sunnis, we have Christians, we have Druze. And all the religious sects yesterday were very clear in the support for injuries. They were very clear on blaming Israel and asking for retaliation. You can see this when you view different areas in Lebanon.
Of course.
Because when I followed up with people living in different parts of Lebanon with different religious backgrounds, sure. I was surprised to see that.
So are you indicating that there's no impact whatsoever on the Hezbollah? Because my question was very specific, sir.
Yes.
Any impact whatsoever on Hezbollah?
I'm implicating that the morale that wasn't targeted, and it had a side effect, or it had an opposite effect by combining people around Hezbollah rather than dividing them.
Okay, okay. That's amazing. You say so. Sushant Sareen, will this then lead to a further escalation in conflict between Israel and Lebanon, or between Israel and Hezbollah? Given Iran's ambassador to Lebanon is also believed to have lost his eyesight, a Hezbollah MP's son is believed to have been killed, and the death toll sadly may rise further.
So the question is that what was the Israeli ambassador doing with the
Iranian
pager, from which messages had gone from the Hezbollah headquarters, or at least that is the way it was disguised. And what was the Hezbollah MP's son doing with that pager? So like I said, that was collateral damage, and I don't know what kind of journalist it is who thinks that state-sponsored terrorism is only one way, and what happened on October 7th in Israel wasn't state-sponsored terrorism by Hamas. And that nothing had to be done about it because it's perfectly kosher to kill Jews. But that's a separate debate again. But look, here is the problem, Gaurav. The escalation in the Middle East has been happening since October 7. Hezbollah has been consistently attacking Israel. They've been lobbing rockets and all kinds of other munitions across Israel. Israel has been retaliating against Hezbollah targets. So that has already been happening. And the fear of a bigger conflict emerging in the region has been there. It's been there for the longest. After the assassination of the Hamas chief, after the assassination of another Hamas functionary in Lebanon, there were war clouds, very serious war clouds, which were hanging over the region, and there was a fear that the Iranians would be jumping in and everything will go for a six. The Americans had sent in their fleet, all kinds of things were happening, and suddenly things cooled down. But I think this conflict between Hezbollah and Israel is going to continue until and unless they both learn to live in peace. If Hezbollah is going to continue targeting Israelis, then Israelis are well within their right to target Hezbollah. Like I said again, there will be collateral damage, and that's extremely unfortunate. But for somebody to say that no, these were only civilians who were targeted, there was no Hezbollah person, Hezbollah is intact. If you look at all the other chatter which is coming out, Hezbollah is devastated by this particular strike. Of course, that they will try and attack to show that
devastated.
But
Hezbollah is devastated. Yes, there may have been civilian damage, but that's collateral damage. Hezbollah has also, after all, targeted civilians in Israel.
Well, you can't live this far from Lebanon and try to assess the situation. This just shows how much you don't know about the country, about how we are divided inside of Lebanon. Well, all videos show civilian casualties. This is the truth that was shown on media. And regarding the casualties, yes, civilian casualties, and this is not side effect. This is the target. These are the people who are targeted, and it's not about side effects or not. And let me just add one point. I'm the kind of
but then civilian casualties are taking place on either side, sir. Civilian casualties are also taking place in Israel. One cannot be justified and the other cannot, be wrong. Clearly, both sides civilian casualties are wrong.
Brother,
no,
I'm not justifying.
I want last 30 seconds with Kanishk Gaur. Kanishk, is there an apprehension something like this could happen to mobile phones in countries like India, which uses a lot of foreign manufactured mobile phones?
There's definitely a possibility. If you preload some of the explosives along with the battery, there is an element of risk which is there. And the level of manufacturing that happens of these mobile phones out of China, where India doesn't have great relationships. This could be
And
the next dimension of hybrid
that
warfare.
red flag must go up immediately. I've run out of time on this part of the show, but this is a story I'll be tracking very closely. To all my guests, many thanks for joining me.